Will Tavares had a dream LV County Championship debut for Gloucestershire as he struck a sensational century to put his side on top on the opening day of the match with Hampshire in a sunny Bristol. Jimmy Adams saw something in the conditions to persuade him to bowl first, following his side's rain-affected draw with Worcestershire last week. He had no early success as Michael Klinger and Chris Dent, fresh from a first-class double hundred last week, made a steady start. Dent may well have a big summer ahead, but not here. On 6, he was the first to go, bowled by James Tomlinson, who shared the new ball with the new recruit from South Africa, Kyle Abbott. Tavares, a famous name in cricket from 30 or so years ago, started his championship career in an encouraging fashion. Chris, who famously once upon a time battened down the hatches for England, is 24-year-old Will's uncle, and the Bristol-born youngster has much to do to match his relation's career in this game. It was a very promising beginning though, along with Klinger, a man who impressed so many locally and nationally in charge of the Gloucesters last summer. A summer which saw them grow leaps and bounds in all formats of the game after a barren few years. The Australian was especially good through the offside as he reeled off a host of pleasing strokes, which may have just made his opposite number wonder whether he was right to decide to have a ball first. Klinger and Tavares had few problems in batting into the afternoon session. The one moment which Hampshire didn't take advantage of was this one, as Sean Irvine dropped a very catchable chance in the slips off Matt Coles. It was to prove costly because, aside from that, Tavares looked as if he'd been playing at this level for some considerable time. He was to make a very impressive maiden 50, but only after Klinger had scored his very early on in the afternoon session. He scored a hatful of runs last season, and this was another fine innings which had thus far used up 86 balls, 9 of which had brought him boundaries. A clipped 2 through mid-wicket also took Tavares to his half-century. That one chance aside, it had been a knock which would have thrilled many in Bristol. He'd required 103 deliveries, 7 of which had gone for 4, but this was just the start for the debutant. Abbott claimed 7 for 29 on his test debut against Pakistan last year, but here he found Tavares' confidence on the rise, as emphasised by this pull for 6. The partnership was now well into 3 figures and the frustrations began to be shown by Hampshire, who wouldn't have expected this. Coles just reminded Klinger of his existence after this bouncer. There was no surprise from anyone that Klinger was batting so well, but few would have expected Tavares to bat with such authority. As the afternoon wore on, he began to look very good indeed as he reeled off one boundary after another, all classic strokes that his uncle, who played 31 tests and 29 ODIs for England, would have been proud of. Will was now heading towards the 90s as the partnership, made on a green tin surface, moved into the 150s. James Vince too gave the batsman a piece of his mind. That stand finally moved on to 163 as Klinger and Tavares kept the Hampshire attack at bay for some 55 overs. At last Klinger fell for 81, Abbott having something to celebrate as the Gloucestershire skipper nicked behind to go with his side nicely placed on 180 for 2. But that soon became 186 for 4. 2 balls later, Alex Kidman was superbly taken behind the stumps by Adam Wheater for a duck, and then Hamish Marshall edged an attempted cut to the keeper after he'd made only 4. None of this, however, appeared to ruin Tavares' concentration as he closed in on a brilliant 100 on a day he will surely never forget. This was his moment. To his 198th delivery, he latched onto a rank full toss from Liam Dawson, which he dispatched over mid-wicket for his second 6. He then rightly received a hug from his partner before raising his bat to celebrate a magical moment. By this stage, he'd struck those 2 maximums and 14 fours in an innings which to date had lasted 4 hours. His work playing grade cricket in Australia over the last couple of winters is certainly paying off. And he still wasn't finished as he and Will Gidman, another who made a wonderful start to his championship career well into his 20s a couple of years back, began to form another attractive partnership as the warm sun continued to bathe this newly developed cricket ground. It's a ground which is improving week on week, while Tavares was just getting better and better himself as well. It was a classic championship innings, the kind of which someone with much more experience would have been pleased with. One thing is clear, Tavares has put down a very early marker this season after impressing in the county's second 11 last year. He had the ideal partner in Gidman, a man who very rarely fails to do something meaningful in a game with either bat or ball. For starters this term, it was his bat that was doing the talking, as he easily moved through the numbers. And before the close, he too was able to raise his bat after securing a rather effortless 50 off only 85 balls, getting there with his 6th boundary. He and Tavares were simply confirming what had become a rather good day for their team as Gloucestershire moved towards 300, still with only 4 men back in the hutch. Tavares took his boundary count to 19 with a cover drive which typified an extraordinary day for a lad whose dream it has been since he was very young to represent Gloucestershire. That dream was now filled with many a fluffy cloud. To their credit, the visiting team kept plugging away right until the end of the day, and in the 94th over, Irvine had Gidman caught behind for 55 to bring an end to a 5th wicket partnership worth 103 runs. Tavares survived along with Cameron Herring to the close, by which time Gloucestershire had made an imposing 292 for 5, but this was undoubtedly Tavares' day. He will go again on the second morning on a mightily impressive 135, which has seen him survive for 272 deliveries overall. Now that's some debut.